Hello and welcome. My name is Biagio Mazza, Pastoral Associate at St. Sabina Parish in Belton, Missouri, and I'm here to welcome you to another Do You Know series question. As we continue our reflections on lived faith experiences, today's Do You Know question is, do you know the significance of tabernacles? We know that in the early church, the sacred species consecrated at Mass was reserved in a special place, a cupboard, or a special place to store bread, for distribution to those members of the community who were sick, homebound, or in prison. This was true for roughly the first 1,000 years of the church. By the year 1000, we have a strong emphasis within the Christian community on the significance of the true and sacred presence of Christ in the species. And what resulted was more elaborate containers for the sacred species that ultimately came to be known as tabernacles. Tabernacles were more, as I said, more elaborate and more well-constructed, and then they were special devotions developed as a result of this. There were actually literally chapels that were built for the reservation of the tabernacle for prayer and adoration. All sorts of rituals and traditions developed around the presence, sacred presence. Things like the host, the elements being demonstrated or displayed in an instrument called a monstrance, large host usually in a monstrance, through which people could view and worship and adore. We also have a number of ceremonies and rituals that developed, like benediction, 40 hours, Corpus Christi processions, and so on. All these developed and became real focus on honoring the sacred presence in the species. We certainly know that by the year of the Council of Trent in 1563, Trent mandated that tabernacles be placed in a significant place in the sanctuary, and even placed on right in the center of the altar, so that this became the focal center of people coming into the church, seeing the presence of Christ in the tabernacle. Candles were also placed next to the tabernacle that burned 24/7, so as to indicate the presence of Christ in the tabernacle. We also have the people coming into the church were expected to genuflect to honor the real presence of Christ in the tabernacle. All this changed significantly with the Second Vatican Council and the liturgical renewal that came with the Second Vatican Council. The Second Vatican Council emphasized that the presence of Christ wasn't just in the tabernacle or the sacred species, but in the whole actions of the liturgy and the Mass. And therefore, the presence of Christ was in the Word, the presence of Christ was in the ministers, in the assembly gathered, as well as in the sacred species. So it recommended very clearly that tabernacles be removed off of the altars and placed in a separate chapel in a separate space near the main sanctuary, but certainly in a separate place for private adoration and worship by people. But the main focal center of Christ's presence among the community became the ambo and the altar. Vatican II retrieved the ancient tradition of seeing the altar as the real symbol of Christ's presence in the midst of the community. And therefore, many of the changes in the sanctuary actually occurred. No longer was it like in Council of Trent, the sanctuary, the throne room for the tabernacle, but rather the sanctuary became the focal center of the altar and the ambo, and the sanctuary also then became the altar. Altar rails were removed so that the people could participate more, and the altar was placed closer to the community so that it could be a more engaged celebration with regards to the Eucharist. Tabernacles are certainly to be revered, but in a separate place outside of the main church, in a separate chapel. And in terms of the lamp was still reserved to indicate Christ's presence in the tabernacle. And these chapels or these little sacred spaces where the tabernacle was an indication, a place for private adoration and private prayer in front of the Blessed Sacrament, which we still do today. So I hope this has helped to explain the significance of tabernacles and the shift that occurred with the Second Vatican Council. We still honor the tabernacle, but we also honor the presence of Christ in the full action of the community. So I hope you'll return again to more Do You Know series questions as we continue to explore our lived faith traditions. Thank you very much.